Hello, authors. Welcome back to Coffee Chats.
Oh my goodness, I'm very excited for this week's conversation. It's going to be a party for sure.
Yes, today we are talking about getting your book into bookstores, the dream. Please ignore my scrambling cats in the background. Today we have two very special guests, and they will be introducing themselves shortly. Drum roll. Here they are. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm sure you guys have seen their lovely faces on this channel before. This is Brian Bies. He's the head of publishing. He's helped over 1,000 authors now write and publish books. And Miss Zara Miller, lovely as always. You know her. You love her. She has a book and a half. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yes?
Yes, very, very.
A book
correct.
and a work in progress.
A book and a work
She
in
has
progress.
gotten her book in bookstores overseas. So we are excited to talk to both of them today about strategies on getting their books into bookstores. Anything you guys would like to add about yourselves?
No, I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Incredibly. I think this is such an important topic especially for independent authors. So yeah, let's hop in.
Totally. All right, Kyra, would you like to ask them their very first question?
Yes. So, as we've all been alluding to, this is a very important topic that is central to the independent authors' minds, hearts, etc. But why exactly is having your book physically available in bookstores important, especially considering how digitized and online everything has become?
Should I go first?
I'll let you
it.
go first, Sarah, and then I'll share my perspective after.
Sure. Well, to be perfectly honest, technically it isn't. Like Barnes and Noble is struggling to stay afloat. Even HarperCollins UK director Charlie Redmayne is buying up all the smaller publishers in Europe to make it work for themselves. But there is another side to that coin. For one, there's the idea of legitimacy behind being an author. And buying books from bookstores has been around way longer than Amazon. It doesn't really matter that people buy mostly from Amazon. The same people would have the audacity to tell you they are not an author if they don't see your book on bookshelves. But reason number two, and that's more important to me personally, is why the hell did I write a book if I don't see it in a physical form in bookstores? It's about fulfilling my emotional satisfaction as well as others' perception. People still go to bookstores, especially independent bookstores are thriving right now, which I don't think anyone saw coming. So the more people have access to our books, the better. Word of mouth is still the most effective marketing tool, at least I believe so. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Those are great 2 cents. Exactly what I would say. It really boils down into credibility in the eyes of other people who are considering buying your book, whether it's in stores or online, and then two, your own personal, I'll say it candidly, your own personal vanity of having your book out there. When it comes to publishing, writing and publishing a book, as important as it is to enjoy and entertain your readers, I think you hit it exactly on the head that as an author, you want to see your book on shelves, in libraries, in people's hands. And there's a personal vanity to that, and that's okay. And so owning that is actually a really, really powerful thing to be aware of as you're publishing a book. And, as you're thinking about supporting independent bookstores, platforms like bookshop.org and others are really great at supporting, championing independent bookstores. So you're not just buying from Amazon or from Barnes & Noble or Books A Million or the really big retail chains out there. And so, taking a step back on this one, I think it's really important that when you publish a book, you should first and foremost celebrate that milestone because it's a pretty big deal. Stats are always thrown around of how 81% of people want to write a book, only 2% have to publish. And so publishing a book is really important. And if for you, going back to that personal success, if having your book in a bookstore is personally important to you, then it should be really important. But as Zara said, not the majority of sales don't come from bookstores anymore. And so, it's important for you to really think about where do you want books, like how are people interacting with your book? How are they getting it into their hands? Are they able to leave reviews? How are they promoting it through word of mouth? And that function is really important. And for some, doing signing events, live readings, and other events at bookstores and getting your books on shelves can be a really powerful mechanism for doing that. And if that's a part of your strategy, great, then bookstores can be a really valuable tool.
Having where your books are matters. I want to continue on that, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, Kyra, he mentioned bookshop.org.
Yes, guys. So I just wanted to quickly pile on to that plug for bookshop.org. I absolutely love that platform because effectively it is the intermediary space between online book purveying and shopping and reinforcing, embracing local bookstores, which again, bookshop.org, it's actually just came upon its 2nd year anniversary, which is kind of goes in tandem with the pandemic. So just be cognizant of not only in putting your book into physical bookstores, not only are you, again, amplifying your brand as an author, showing the ways in which you're plugged into the community, but yeah, you are supporting the broader community. And for lack of a more delicate way of putting it, not just funding a super mega machine. You spread the wealth, people. That's all I'm saying.
Completely agree.
Absolutely.
So this is the next question. Since where your book is matters, and it often comes down to a personal feeling, and especially as indie authors, in order for your book to be somewhere, you kind of have to ask more often than not. So how did the bookstore/vendors/libraries you reached out to align with your book and your author identity? Another way you could read this question is where did you choose in particular to start first, and why did that matter to you?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what do you mean by author identity? Like a genre that we write in, or?
It could be genre, because there are a lot of bookstores that are very heavily genre based, which I think is cute. But it also could be because you picked a local bookstore that's near your hometown, or where you grew up, if that's in a different place.
Right. Well, I think that, Brian, go ahead. Yeah.
I'll take this one first, because I as a publisher, sort of in the publishing side, I'll sort of give sort of the high level of some things, and then I love your experience, your own personal anecdotes and stories of reaching out to bookstores, I think will be super helpful and invaluable for authors here. And so sort of taking a step back on this one, to Mackenzie's question of, deciding what bookstores would stock your book, how you engage in partnership, in conversation with bookstores, really sort of a framework that I found to be really powerful is looking at sort of three different criteria: location, affinity, and community. Location, affinity, and community are really sort of the 3 ways in which you should look at bookstores, and honestly use that as a function of identifying potential bookstores and potential organizations you may want to partner with, that may stock your book, that may sell your book, that may promote you or host you for an event. First one is obviously location. Location is a pretty obvious one, but it's a question that you should ask yourself of location. What are your historical locations of where you've been? Where did you grow up? Where do you live now? What is considered your locale and current location? That's a really great criteria for looking at potential bookstores, because that's going to open you up. And especially if you use the store locator function on bookshop.org, if you want to champion independent bookstores, can be a really great way to do that. Just going into that store locator section on the website, typing in your zip code or the zip code of where you grew up can help you identify potential bookstores that are local to you. And then when you reach out to them or ask them to host you for an event, because you grew up in the area, it's your hometown, or maybe that's where you live currently, you have that strong connection with them that'll make them a great potential partner. Sort of the second one is affinity, and as sort of we're asking here is what are your values as an author? Values as a creator, supporting independent bookstores versus larger retail, outlets like Barnes and Noble and Amazon and Books A Million, and other smaller chains like Politics and Prose, Busboys and Poets, and Shakespeare and Company, one's local to where I am on the East Coast here, using that affinity of both, size of that retailer and also the genre that Mackenzie alluded to there, that they, stock books or specialize in the books that they sell, can be a really great criteria for looking at stores. And then the third one is actually looking at community. You may not think about this one when you're thinking about location, but also in terms of your community of where did you go to school? Where did you go to middle school, high school, college, graduate school? Where did your friends and family go to college, graduate school, and so on? Is those can be really great bookstores and really great libraries. And some of them, many of them will actually have recommended book lists that you can then add your book onto those lists, and can be a really great promotional framework there as well.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, isn't that how Taylor Swift propelled herself to stardom? She shook 500,000 hands, and then there you go.
Exactly. That's exactly what Taylor Swift did. She started out.
And you start with your roots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Start with your roots, know them well, and then bridge out to the county over, then the state over, and then you'll amass 500,000 hands, 500,000 true fans that will then take you to platinum, just like they did with Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I would agree. You definitely need to look at the landscape of the bookstore you're reaching out to, because you may end up giving them the whole pitch speech and they get back to you with, well, I'm sorry, we just don't have enough foot traffic to order your book or more than 3 copies. And I know this sounds kind of conceited, but from a logistical standpoint, or even not that, because every sale counts, but more from a time management angle, it's not worth it. So obviously, if my target audience is young adult, pitching a book to Barnes and Noble on university campuses is a good idea. They will order 25 copies and will keep ordering because there is demand. You have to look at what you can offer the person you're pitching to, what's in it for them, if they indulge you. And in business, I also have 3 commandments that I abide by, which I call the 3 P's: profit, prestige, and press. If you can offer at least one, you can start a negotiation confidently, because press will bring prestige and both of those will bring profit. So for both parties, if you strike a good deal, which you should, you never sell yourself short, especially if you have talent to back it up.
Absolutely.
What was the first bookstore you picked, Zara?
It was Barnes and Noble. Yeah. I'm a sellout. I'm an indie sellout.
Nothing.
But so how
wrong
did
with Barnes and
you?
Noble.
Nothing at all. And so the question is, and this kind of leads into the next one, how did you, with Barnes and Noble in particular, did you reach out to your local Barnes and Noble and call that store directly, or did you fill out the massive online form that you have to fill out in order to get your book stocked in dozens or hundreds of stores?
The latter. Yeah, the latter. I filled out the form. It was excruciatingly painful, but I felt it was worth it because I had a lot of interviews already lined up or behind me, a lot of marketing that they would really appreciate, which you kind of have to attest to in that form. Basically, that people know you, that they can sign you on and distribute your book, and it will sell. So that's why I decided to do that. And they did get back to me. They told me that they would distribute my book regionally, here on the East Coast. And then I just went to a random Barnes and Noble and it wasn't there. And by trial and error, I learned that basically Barnes and Noble turned into this chain of independent bookstores. And even when an order comes from the higher above, the store manager can reject that and they will not order your book. And I wish someone had told me that. So yeah, but either way, it got distributed to a lot of bookstores, to a lot of Barnes and Noble, and yeah. So, but the reality is that it was painful. It was filling out that form.
Yeah, bookstores can be can be a definite challenge. There was an author who published their book last year with us. Her name was Olivia, and one of her goals in publishing her book was that she wanted her book in all 50 states across the United States, which is a pretty cool
national
goal.
distribution.
Yeah, like true national distribution. But for her, like she would have been content with like even if just one bookstore stocked my book, that would be incredible. And I share, the story of Olivia here because it's actually a really cool, really powerful story of how now, like over 40 states across the country stock her book. I think it might actually be closer to 50 by this point since I last spoke to her, but it's really cool. What she did is she went to barnesandnoble.com, looked up the store locator section of the website, typed in each individual state, and just pulled up the list of every single Barnes & Noble's bookstore, every single address, every single phone number, compiled it into the spreadsheet, and she went one by one methodically for each state, starting off with A, so starting off with like Alaska, Arkansas, and going down the alphabet. Every single Barnes & Noble store until the one Barnes & Noble would tell her, yes, I will stock a copy of your book. And then they placed an order through Ingram. And she went through pretty consistently every single state. But what was really cool and really powerful about it, as she was sharing with me about her experience, is that as she reached out to different states and to different Barnes & Nobles, certain states were more combative than others. Like, for example, New York gave her an absolutely difficult time, had her go fill out the form, even then wouldn't stock her book. She found the right person in New York who was willing to stock a copy or two of her book. But other states like California and Washington State were so much more receptive and open to her. And so a piece of this conversation about bookstores is every bookstore is different. And so as you're doing that outreach, and Olivia is a great one because she wanted to get her book into all 50 states. And so she did the grunt work of doing all of that. Having those conversations can be really powerful. But don't be surprised if a bookstore doesn't want to stock your book at first, because for some, it will be about risk of they only have so much shelving space and they want to make sure that the books that they stock on their shelves will sell. And that's why Amazon as a digital online, primary retailer is really great, because they don't have those same inventory stock requirements that they're concerned about. They don't have to buy a book at, 55% wholesale discount to then sell it for that retail price. They can just sell it direct to consumer. And so some of these conversations that you might have with bookstores, they may give you a term that they use in the industry called consignment. And consignment is essentially a way that a bookstore will stock your book, where essentially what they will do is ask you to give them anywhere between 1 and 10 copies of your book. They won't pay you for those copies of your book that you will print and send or hand deliver to them when they receive them. They'll only pay you after the book sells. And so it's important when you're having these conversations or partnering with a bookstore to host you for a signing event that you're very aware up front, what kind of relationship do you have with them? Are they ordering your book directly through Ingram, or are they buying them directly through you? Or are you able to bring copies of your book and then sell them to people at the signing event or at the live reading? Or is the expectation that they're just going to get from you a handful of copies that they will then only pay you after they sell? And so it's important as you're thinking about submitting your book or having certain bookstores do it, there can be a real inventory management question for you to answer of, financially, what if one bookstore were to get 10 copies of your book? It may only cost $2 to $3 to print the book, but times 10 copies times maybe 15 bookstores, is that a financial investment? Is that a risk that you're comfortable with? Where they may say, we want to enter into consignment 10 copies across 15 stores, so that's 150 copies. Are you comfortable with a consignment relationship with that versus another dynamic? It's important to think about those questions when you're thinking about bookstores.
And some bookstores with the consignment deal, in my experience, they've told me, and by the way, we're not going to tell you when it sells. You have to check in with us. And I was like,
It's
just
not a good deal
extra.
usually. It's not a good
Yeah.
deal usually,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Right. And then another thing to bear in mind with consignment deals, and particularly independent mom and pop bookstores, please do your research and see if they already have a consignment deal or form on the website. Because you go in asking about it and it's on the website, they'll automatically dismiss you. Like, it's one of their biggest pet peeves.
Yeah.
So check to see if it's there first.
Yep.
Yeah. But the comment about New York and like on the East, about the East Coast in general was on point. Like, I feel like the further west you go, the more people calm down. Like here on the East Coast, I know people have generational PTSD from the war, I guess. So they're always like on the lookout, like, who are you? What do you want? But the further west you go, I feel like it's easier to negotiate. So yeah, it was on point.
I feel like the only exception to that rule is California, but yes.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't been there though, so.
Yeah. And for all you know, your experience with a bookstore may be very different from another author's experience. And so it's really important that when you're thinking about marketing or selling your book to bookstores, you're able to document some pretty clear metrics around your book. If you can, clearly show them my book has sold X number of copies in the first 6 months, in the first year since it was published. How many reviews my book has on Instagram, on Goodreads, on Amazon, showing them those data points of where word of mouth, of where marketing, of where your book has already succeeded are really great data points to make bookstores feel more comfortable, because they're going to be more excited about hosting you for an event if they're able to do it, as certain states here slowly or very quickly, removing COVID, mask requirements and things like that. So it's important that you have those data points and you arm yourself with that.
Agreed.
The answer to this question, which I think is, I'll probably answer for you here, Zara, as well, and probably everybody here, is to have a spreadsheet, just be methodical in your organization. The number one thing that separates an author who is successful and an author who is unsuccessful is how they keep themselves organized. The authors who are most successful have a spreadsheet where they meticulously track every single person, every single organization, every single Bookstagram influencer, every single family member, every single person or thing that they want to do outreach to. And they track when they do outreach, when they follow up until they get a yes or a definitive no. Having a spreadsheet to track all of your conversations will make your life 100 times easier, no exaggeration, because it'll just keep you aware of where everything is at all times.
Yeah, it was a lot different for me, but again, keep in mind that I thought that my book was already taken care of, right? So yeah, but I didn't keep track on an Excel sheet because honestly, I don't have a good relationship with Excel sheets. I broke up with them in high school, and going back to your high school relationship is one of the worst ideas out there, second only to wearing Uggs. So I do it the old-fashioned way. Either I write it down in a notebook and I keep about bookstore outreach, or I just take a screenshot and keep it on my phone. So I do keep track. It's just that Excel sheets are not my jam, unfortunately.
For sure. And if Excel spreadsheets aren't your jam, Google Sheets, all that stuff isn't your speed, as you're saying right there, the key thing is though is you have a process where you meticulously track and are aware of what you're doing, when you're doing it, how you're doing it, where things are. And that's really what matters as you think about bookstores, reviews, any of this stuff. Having a system of organization is critical for success.
Agreed.
Any follow-up questions to that one, Kyra?
I guess my only other follow-up question would be, as you were intentional or can be intentional about following up with certain conversations, what general leeway would you give for response? Because a bookstore is not necessarily the same as like an individual. So
Yeah.
what's the correspondence window?
What I would do, and this is just having done and managed telesales efforts for our authors and sort of going through that experience, the number one way to do this one is to do a phone call. And honestly, do a phone call every single day until they answer. Like, I have my phone here as a prop for a reason, because once you pull your phone out and you force yourself to make that phone call, it's going to make all the difference. They're either going to answer or they're not. And if they're not, call them again tomorrow, or call them again in a couple hours, because that's going to be your quickest way to get a response. And then you can just follow up with an email and say like, hey, here's what we talked about. Here's the game plan. And then it drives action and momentum. Don't just send an email out into the void or fill out a random form unless they've explicitly said on their website that is the only way that they accept communication. Don't break their rules, follow their process if they have one. But calling them on the phone and following up every day until you get an answer will save you a headache, and maybe even tell you like, maybe that bookstore is closed for the holidays, or maybe they're closed permanently or temporarily because of the pandemic or whatever it may be. So it's important to do that. And another thing sort of I'll share as a bonus, is depending on the bookstore, depending on the library that you're reaching out to, consider if there are people local to you, like maybe friends, family, coworkers, classmates, that you have connections to. Ask them to reach out to the bookstore on your behalf and ask them to ask the bookstore. You can give them a short 2-minute script where they call the store up on the phone. You can tell them exactly what to say, how to do it, and give a fun little activity. Deputize your friends, your family, people you know. You'll surprise yourself at how willing they are, and that's a really great way as you're keeping track of outreach to bookstores. Who is actually the person doing the outreach is another question, because maybe you're not just the only one doing it.
Yeah, following up is tricky, especially with bookstores, because there are a million people working there and you will give yourself a headache for sure. So, my strategy is to always make friends with whoever answers the phone, or I specifically ask for the store manager. And I literally just make friends with them and extract a name and one personal information. So when I call back and whoever answers, I can give them the name so that I don't have to go through the process of who I am, why I'm calling over and over again. As to when it comes to timelines, it's kind of difficult because there's like worldwide paper shortage. So it could take up to a month, even 2 months, when you want to get your book overseas to actually arrive. So I would always give them 2 to 3 weeks at least to check in whether my book is already there, and we can do a virtual signing event or on-site signing event. So yeah.
Yeah, that's super helpful, because I think that laying the infrastructure for outreach is one thing, but the complete and utter follow through, especially since it's contingent on response, is another thing. So I really appreciate that additional insight. So we're about to ask our last official question. So if anybody in the audience has, I think we saw a couple of questions dropped inside the chat, but if you have any questions, drop them in the chat over here, and we'll be happy to share those with our panelists. But ultimately, what can getting your book inside of physical bookstores or other entities that are non-internet, I guess, not online, in person, how can that change your author brand?
I'll let you answer this one first, Zara.
Sure. Well, it's a really good question. I would say it definitely added some credit to my name as an author. I noticed an increase in sales on Amazon, probably because people saw my book in Barnes and Noble and were like, I bet I can buy this on Amazon for way cheaper. It also opened up some opportunities for book signings and speaking conferences. I'm actually going to Philadelphia in March for a WP conference, and then to Indianapolis in June for TAA one. But what I hold really dear to my heart is that parents keep emailing me about how they bought my book for their teenagers, and they ended up having many conversations about it, which is just an indescribable feeling to have. People telling you that this stuff. So I'm very grateful, and I feel very fulfilled as a writer.
I don't think I could add anything beyond that. I think the story that you just shared there, Zara, is so powerful and moving, and it's a testament to how bookstores can be one way to establish a stronger relationship with your readers, because it's another touch point that they can see your book. It's another avenue for them to buy your book, to hold it in their hands. And so as you're thinking about how bookstores can, change your brand as an author, it may not change it in the big flashy ways of, now that I'm in physical bookstores, people are, asking, for my, autograph or taking photos with me, or things like that. But it's much more in that personal, intimate relationship that you can foster. It's a little bit different because you're not able to directly talk to them. But if you include, social media, email, other ways to contact you online or in your book, it can be a really powerful way to foster that meaningful relationship.
And they will reach out for sure. And we do need that a lot. I mean, we're artists. We're like Tinkerbell. We need applause to live. So yeah, it adds up.
Alrighty. Well, let's turn to the audience, folks. We've got a question here from Allison.
Do it.
How do you approach non-bookstores like boutiques, gift shops to stock your book?
Yeah, it's a great question. It really comes down to, as I shared before about consignment, many of those boutique stores, local to my area are places like Politics Pros, Shakespeare Company, Busboys Poets. They may be less likely to order a book through Ingram. And so they may be more comfortable doing a consignment relationship where, as I said before, a consignment relationship is where you give them, hand deliver or ship a handful of copies of your book, between 1 and 10 copies, usually is what it's for. And then they'll pay you for those sales after your book sells. As Mackenzie shared, some bookstores will automatically tell you, some you have to go back and ask, but it's important to, answer and address those questions first and up front, before you actually enter into that relationship. And again, as Kyra shared, if they have a form online, if they have information about how they stock books or how they manage inventory, pay attention to those things, because doing the basic things of actually looking at their website and paying attention to detail, 95% of authors don't do that. And that puts you a cut above the rest automatically. And so being aware of what consignment means, and having those conversations with them through that lens and doing that research up front is really powerful.
I agree. Honestly, I can't speak to that question at all because I haven't reached out to any of these boutiques or just places where you don't normally see books. I do know Busboy and Poets, though. They have good food. But other than that, I think Brian is the expert here. So,
well, I will tell you in my experience, because I've had my book stocked in a few museum gift shops, and then also some local like shopping boutique kind of gift places nearby. And what they like to do is order books from me directly. So that's kind of, and which is what you would do with consignment, but they'll order it from me directly and I sell it to them at the wholesale price. And so they just pay me up front and then they sell the books. That is my preferred method, honestly, when it comes to like, if I'm that over consignment 100%, because there's really no risk involved. And when I do a wholesale deal, you're looking at generally about 50 to 55% off market retail price per book.
Nice.
Yeah. And that's a really great example right there, Mackenzie, of how if you have a clear affinity to that store or to that library, it makes total sense to go after them as a market. Your book Beyond the Halls being about museums,
yeah.
such a clear affinity and alignment. Of
Mhm.
course, every bookstore will want to stock your book because for them, it's a great way to promote people going to museums, fans of what they do, and all of that. And so finding that affinity can be really powerful.
Yeah, it really aligns with their brand. If you want to get your book into places where they don't normally sell books, the question is, okay, but why should they? So brand alignment is definitely
Yeah.
something to be aware of. Yeah, makes sense.
And ultimately, brand alignment ends up being because this is a local author. Like 90% of the time, that's the biggest one. Especially
Yeah.
if it's just like a gift store that just sells like I have books in a store down the street they sell like spoons and candles and all this kinds of things and a few books. But she like puts my books up on the register and she's like local
Aw.
author. So
Local
which I think is so
author, yeah.
precious.
That is precious.
Exactly.
That is adorable.
Exactly. And one thing that I'll quickly just clarify again, because you said it briefly there, Mackenzie, about the wholesale, selling of a book to a bookstore, to a gift shop, when you're doing it or when Ingram is doing it. Usually bookstores, gift shops, stores, libraries tend to buy books at a 50 to 55% wholesale discount. And so that's when you're selling to bookstores, or in this particular context and conversation that we're having, if, as you think about as an author wanting to sell your book, wanting to promote your book and drive sales through other channels, conferences, events, festivals, and other opportunities, that discount might change. Like it might be closer to a 20 or 30% discount instead. Bookstores have a very clear model. Brick and mortar bookstores adhere to that 50 to 55%. And so you'll want to follow that one. But as you're thinking about other opportunities beyond bookstores, it's important to make that distinction. So that way, as you're negotiating and selling your worth as an author, you're doing it in the right way.
Right, this is a good one. What exactly is the language of what they're asking for? Are you asking them to carry your book, order your book, stock your book? How would you recommend language in this one?
I would avoid the word order just because it implies money. And when people don't know you and you pull out money, the first sentence they hear from you is buy something from me. It usually doesn't build trust, right? So, I mean, the ideal scenario is that you go into a phone call or into an email with, listen, these and these bookstores already carry my book, and I would love for you to join the club. But when you do it for the first time, there are many cards that you can play. Local author is an amazing one. A charity cause would be a good one. Like if you're trying to support a community and them carrying your book is would be a testament to serving a community in some way, is a good one as well. It depends. But when you make that first phone call, the first email, I would avoid anything that implies money, money, money. Please buy something from me.
Yeah, I would just add that the best word that I have found to use is the word stock. It's just the industry term that many bookstores are comfortable and used to saying of, I want you to stock my book, or would you be able to stock my book? You can, if it's a more casual conversation, you can say carry your book or carry my book. But stock is a great word to use because it's most bookstores, most people in the industry, in retail, understand that for what it is. And it's a clear way of talking about money and ordering a book without it being buy my book in a weird, uncomfortable, awkward way.
Yeah, and it also implies plurality, which means that they will get the signal from you that I want you to order more than one copy. I want you to stock my book and keep ordering if it sells. So, yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah. And if you're backing it with my book already has X reviews on Amazon, Y reviews on Goodreads, it's already pre-sold Z number of copies, and you're able to give those data points, it becomes such an easy, clear case for them to want to stock your book, whether it's 1 copy, 5 copies, or more, or even more copies than that.
Well, thank you, audience members, for your excellent questions. And thank you, panelists, for your insight and answers.
Yeah.
Of course.
That is all we have for you today for today's coffee chat. I want to thank you both again for your time and insight. Do you have any final words of wisdom for the authors watching this video?
Well, thank you for having me, having us, K&M. I really appreciate it. I love the coffee chats. It's so much fun. Final thoughts? I don't know. Get that coin, I guess. It's good to see your book in the bookstore. So go out there.
Yeah.
Beautifully said.
Absolutely. When your book is in a bookstore, take a photo of it, take a selfie with it, post it on social media, tag the bookstore, tag your publisher, do all those things, because that can be really great social media content, promotion, activate your book through word of mouth. And the broader thing that I would share sort of with anybody on this one or watching the recording or anything is as you come out of this conversation, the challenge that I would give to you is to focus less on my book is in a bookstore versus my book is not in a bookstore. And I would focus much more on, are my readers getting their hands on my book? Are they able to easily leave reviews on Amazon and Goodreads? Are they recommending my book to their friends or other people that they know? Like, what is the actual relationship and connection that you're fostering with your audience, with your community, and your readers? Because that's really where, even if your book isn't even in stores and it never makes it into a physical bookstore, you can still do a lot of good, make a lot of impact, and reach a ton of readers. And so as you're thinking about this one here, I would challenge anyone and everyone to focus on how can you foster and cultivate that relationship, and maybe being in a bookstore, taking that photo or that selfie on that bookshelf can be a really great way to do that.
Yeah, it's definitely a humble brag that you can get away with. Or I usually take a selfie with whoever is at the bookstore at the moment, like with the manager, to not make it seem like I'm as much of a narcissist as I actually am, and like kind of lift up the workers because they are guardians of our bookstores and they should be appreciated. So
exactly.
Well, thank you both again. It's been a pleasure chatting with you as always.
Of course. Thank you for having us.
You guys.
Take care. What a heartwarming conversation.
Wasn't it? I love talking about bookstores. I'm just, again, another not so shameless plug for bookshop.org. Being intentional, embracing your local author status, that could open a lot of doors. I really gleaned a lot from this conversation. Yes, hashtag shop small. So yeah, I learned a lot from this conversation, and it's just sort of a reminder that, this journey is never done. And on the one hand, that sounds exhausting, but on the other hand, it's super exciting because you can continue to grow and find new places for your readers. Like the questions that Brian posed at the end: are my readers getting their hands on my book? What relationships am I fostering? Like the fact that this conversation is an important aspect of that broader understanding of your book's mission and your author identity is huge. So, yeah.
Totally. And I'm feeling inspired to make a giant spreadsheet like Olivia. Honestly, like to go through every book. I mean, sounds incredibly daunting, but to know that you have all of those options, that's the part that's exciting. Just because someone says no, she just said, okay, went down the list, right? Instead of feeling super defeated, which is like, would be my first reaction, honestly. So that was a super empowering story. If there's anything that you guys want to talk about, any remaining questions, any topics, any people that you would love to hear from, authors included, we'd love to reach out to them. We'd love to have them on coffee chats. We'd love to have you on a coffee chat if you would like. Feel free to reach out to us, suggest a topic, any of the places to contact us below, Instagram, Quip if you're on there. That's all for today. Any plugs for the next coffee chat, Kyra?
The next coffee chat, we're going to be talking more about how to get reviews on your book. Last week, we talked a little bit more explicitly about advanced reviews and editorial reviews. This is just reviews at large. So stay tuned for that conversation. That's ought to be a fun doozy.
Yes, a fun doozy. Oh, goodness. All right, party people. We'll see you next time.
Bye.